Hi, Jesse.
Our problem is,
Hi, everyone. We are.
One conversation.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Great to be with you all. This is our first exec meeting of 2024 and my first as chair. So I made this comment, thank you at the board, but please go easy. There's a light but still meaty agenda ahead of us, and serious big topics ahead of the board. So please, remember to respect one another and my newness at managing the conversation. As a reminder, this is a hybrid meeting. We continue to adopt a hybrid meeting policy with members of the public and press invited to join remotely. You can find our full board policy online, and this meeting is streamed live on our YouTube channel, and a transcript is being recorded. The meeting will live on our YouTube channel and is accessible to the public. Tonight we have two agenda items followed by chair reports from Jesse and myself. There's two reports from Jesse and myself. There are no objections. We're going to just jump right into it in respect of everyone's time. And we're going to start, sorry, Paul, but he said, oh, I'm first. With a joint land use letter regarding City of Yes, economic opportunity application. Just want to remind everyone that this is the second of 3 economic opportunity or City of Yes proposals. There is some discussion about why this one is centered now. Maybe we should have heard housing before economic opportunity, but so be it. We are where we are, and want to thank Paul and his committee for taking the lead on this and inviting Chelsea Land Use to join and participate in the discussion. And so, Paul, I will turn it to you.
Thank you. So first I want to apologize because I was working with the Hell's Kitchen Land Use Committee timetable to get this out, and then last week Jesse said, no, it has to come through exec because it's technically a joint letter. So this first draft was circulated on Friday to many people. Christine didn't receive it because I used her wrong email address. The 2 co-chairs of both land use committees, so Jeffrey and Kerry, and Jessica and Joe have all seen this. I worked with Frank and Ted on some of the components of the NYCHA issue as a response to the conversations we had at Hell's Kitchen Land Use. The challenge with this is that DCP has asked us to go through 18 different categories the way that they have structured it, but it doesn't necessarily align with the zoning text amendment redlined 1,000-page document that Christine has gone through much more in detail. So we're trying to balance the way to present the information. I think the important thing is the first thrust of the letter, which is basically the first 3 pages, talks about what this board thinks as a general objection to this and what needs to change. And it addresses our concerns that we're talking about converting commercial to residential. Converting residential to commercial when we're in a housing crisis. Yeah. We should be going the opposite direction. Right. And so that should be a forefront, not increasing commercial activity. Second is the enforcement issues. We have suffered a great deal because agencies don't have the staff to enforce the rules that are currently in place today. And when we met with DCP to say that to them, they said, oh, this is to streamline and make things easier. We sent them 4 pages of questions, and in each of their answers was, well, DOT will look at that, FDNY will look at that, NYPD will look at that, DOB will look at that. And we're like, we need to have enforcement of these changes, or we're going to continue to have lots of conflicts. To change a residential building to 49% commercial with customers and deliveries coming in and out without anybody enforcing it is a challenge. So we're saying to them, you need to institute a budget for enforcement at staff at agency level and increase staffing. And then we always have the similar problem with any citywide presentation, is that the citywide objective does not necessarily address the neighborhood objectives. So how do you take a citywide zoning text amendment that works in Staten Island or Rockaway Beach and Times Square and Hell's Kitchen? So we're trying to address that. So that's sort of the thrust of what the letter says. And then from the 18 points, we're going through in very nuanced perspective. And DCP has asked us to do something which I was kind of surprised they asked us to do, is to say, of these 18, that might go to city council and line item 14 and line item 17 might get rejected, line item 12 and 3 might get adjusted, and the others will get approved. So they not only asked us for thoughts that, like, we were going through the process about what we were concerned about and raising our issues, but then they said, if you like something because it's working for you, tell us so that we can reinforce that it stays in this. And so when it gets to city council, the city council member can say, we like this in our neighborhood, we don't like this in our neighborhood, take this out, leave this in, adjust that. So that process is a little bit different than we've done other letters. And so we're going through, and Joe and Matt Sullivan, his community planner on his staff, are going through and looking at each of these line items and saying, what is it that we have worked with in the past here that's worked? What is it that is not working? And then taking sort of the comments from the committee meetings and incorporating that language to say, this issue is of concern, this issue is fine, this issue needs to be adjusted. So the first 3 pages of the letter are predominantly done. You'll see some highlights on here and some citations we want to put in. But then each of the 18 line items you see are specific to the way that they want us to respond. And so we're trying to structure the responses to fit their needs. And that is not fully complete.
Yeah.
All right.
And I actually watched the video again after sitting through it the first time and made notes to try to capture all the members' requests. So we get it clear, because it was, not that it was freewheeling, but it was very detailed, right?
Yeah, they and the DCP staff that live and breathe this all the time, they would say, oh, well, use group 6 could be adjusted to include da, da, da. And we're like, what are you saying? I'm like, you know, and then Christine has gone through all the parking sections of the zoning text amendment and all the redlining there, and no layperson can read that and understand what's going on. But they come to the meeting and they're like, oh, and you're like, what are you talking about? So it got a little bit complicated at points. So we're trying to get our message across about what is important to us. And then the things that are less important to us, we're kind of just saying this works for us, and we have a history of supporting this sort of language in the past. So we're making some tweaks to that degree.
And one overarching thing that we put in here, because they liked it, is saying that a lot of these mixture of commercial and residential use, if you're building a new building, new construction, or converting an office building, you can do sets of elevators and stairs and stuff like this. But an existing building, it's near impossible. So we pitched to them the idea, if you said only for buildings that are new construction or conversion after the referral date of the zoning. So it's never going to capture an apartment building that someone's going to go into and do this and do that and make life impossible for people, because it's not really being thought through. And they actually said, oh, that's a good idea. I'm just fell off my chair. So.
But it was, I mean, Christine, your building was a perfect example.
Yeah, you're a great example.
And because they've already done Airbnb is turning it commercial or residential.
Right.
So you could say, look, you've already done it and look at all the problems we have had, and we have lost a lot of housing. So you may want to reference
We should actually reference it.
Airbnb.
Yeah, Airbnb, if we should do
Because
that.
that's,
Especially given the governor's budget proposal, which will allow them to re-legalize, provided they are paying the appropriate taxes, which they never were required to do before. So the market is on hold right now, but a part of the executive budget included a provision to re-legalize VRBO and Airbnb by allowing them to pay the hotel tax, which had never happened before.
why would they
I'll just-
legalize?
I'll just quickly add that this did have to go to Borough Board already, just given the timing issue. And really tried to thank you, Paul, for helping prepare me for that, but also want to note, really tried to emphasize the importance of the enforcement piece, and that a concurrent ask and plan needs to be put in place there. And I think we really should continue to lean into that, both as part of this letter and just generally. As well as the issue of new construction versus existing was met with a little bit more challenge, just because some community boards anticipate less new construction in their districts, like they're built, as they describe them. Obviously, the city is constantly renewing itself, but that was some feedback we got. So we just made, and connected to that, a third point, which is that they were looking to consider each of these independently. So we had to vote on each of the 18 pieces.
Yeah.
So I think that, well, I think because if it was a wholesale yay or nay, they wouldn't get
Anything.
anything. And so I think the feedback that anybody has on each of the individual points is really important still, because this is so big and the more detailed we can be on each of these specific 18 proposals, like, I think there's interest in looking at them one by one, and then how they will be
In the
potentially.
council?
I think so, yes.
And you'll see, if you had the chance, and I know got it to Dropbox at 4 o'clock, so again, I apologize for that. But within the 18, there are some that we say we're fairly neutral on this, some we say strongly opposed, this should be taken out. Some we say this can go forward as long as these changes go in. And some of the ones on changes are urban agriculture, just had a lot of points on making sure that residents are protected. But it seems like that one wasn't so terrible. The nightlife issue, Frank and Ted have worked pretty hard on figuring out, there was a discussion about tickets versus showtime and how that impacts the neighborhood. And we were concerned about lines and queues on the sidewalks and the negative impact to the neighborhood on that. And then this notion of dancing and music. So there's a non-musical component now, and then there's a dancing component. And we wanted to make sure that if someone like a pocket bar in Hartwell's Kitchen that accommodates 30 people, if people just started dancing suddenly, they wouldn't be in violation of a dancing regulation. So we worked with Frank and Ted to try to figure out some language on that.
Every time, yeah, we're always opposed.
I think we can. So, yeah, we're ready for questions on the letter. Bert?
Yeah, I mean, I think one, I strongly agree with the enforcement. You can write as much as you want, you can change as much as you want, but if you don't have anybody out there on the street, that's what you want.
Yeah.
So I think I strongly agree with that piece, and also the changes, new construction and conversions, but not existing buildings. I remember there was something, putting commercial on top floors in buildings.
Above
What
residential.
was that from?
Right.
You know, I do have, on some of these specific points, I just have a question, like, on number 8. We took no position on the proposal, which is give life science something more certainty to grow. I don't understand why didn't we take a position? And I just.
Because we didn't get to that.
Because nobody raised it as a concern.
Well, I
And
just
so
felt
we're
like
neutral on it.
yesterday or today, they announced a 35-story life science building on 11th Avenue.
Correct. It's a proposal. It's a
No,
proposal.
But
That's a press.
But let me answer that question directly, because we as a board have never taken a position on life science or science labs in this district. So although there's a proposal coming forward across from Javits, we will have the opportunity to voice an opinion on this. So the reason we took a very neutral statement on that is because we haven't taken a position in the past, and no one on any of the committees raised it as an issue when the whole thing was presented to us. So this does not say we're for or against it, we're not addressing it.
yeah, well, why can't we use this as an opportunity to address?
We didn't develop consensus. on it.
Because we didn't.
Okay,
because
okay, I got it.
Because in the 3 presentations from DCP, nobody raised it as. a
Okay,
topic.
just also-
So we didn't talk about
Maybe I'm just being too. you
No,
know,
I appreciate
detailed
it.
here.
I appreciate
So like
it.
15,
it. Which one?
create process for allowing
Wait.
corner stores.
Tell me again who you are.
16,
Lines.
create.
Topic.
Number 16,
Sorry.
18, create process for allowing corner stores in residential areas. We take
No,
position.
what that is
What's
that,
the objection?
that's actually for NYCHA campuses or large residential campuses where no stores exist.
Or like Bayside, like, or somewhere in the back. of
Yeah, well, that
Queens,
was
right, where
15.
there's all
15
residential.
specifically talks about
Yeah,
NYCHA
15 is the
campuses,
NYCHA.
but this is
It's
16.
the same thing.
It's corner stores, and as Jeff points out, places in, this is where the
Okay.
neighborhoods versus, like, Post Kitchen versus Astoria is very different.
And 18 itself, I understand question marks, I'm not even sure what the hell.
Well, the question mark again, nobody, this is again.
Districts of future job hubs.
No.
What is that?
We didn't know what that meant.
We didn't know.
But that's what I'm saying, I don't know what it means.
And again, but nobody raised, at the 3 different committee meetings we had on this, nobody raised any issues around that, so I left it specifically like, we're not saying anything about it, because nobody said anything about it.
DCP could not say, they said that's in the future, when we figure out regulations and like, they gave us a whole like. What does that even mean?
So can our statement in response to those be more information is requested, be able to better take a position on
Yeah,
this?
sure.
Yep,
Yeah,
did that,
rather than saying no position,
right, okay, that's
to
fair.
take a position, we need more information. That makes sense.
More information.
Anybody else?
I'm just gonna follow up on the blood center, yeah, if you could look at that 224 about the life sciences and just
Line.
Okay.
line. The one that.
Keeping you on your toes.
Can
The light-
put the same statement in there, more information?
I would look at what happened at the Upper East Side and the blood center there. That was a huge problem. And I think because they tried to zone it, you know,
But
and
do you recall this board ever taking a position on that issue?
No,
So
no,
that's
but this
where,
is, but like Bert said, this is our chance to take a position on the issue.
But we haven't even discussed it to have a position.
we,
Okay, so
like,
discuss,
the three of us can't make this decision.
I mean, that's what we do. We can discuss it, right?
No, the
Not
full
me,
board, the
they-
full
they.
board does.
Or full board, yeah, or land use, whoever wants to bring it up can,
But it has not, well, we could put, I mean, you know, what, you want to say you're in favor of it or not?
no, just make I don't know if. there
What do
should
you
be
want,
any
what do you
comment.
want, what do you want to say?
I don't have anything to say specifically, it's just that I don't like what says take no position on this proposal, knowing that this was sticking issues in other
Why don't we
sections
use
of
the
the
same
city.
language though as just.
But just if you wanna look at what.
Just if you want more information about.
Yeah, I don't know what that means,
Before,
more certainty to grow.
right,
What's that
I don't mean that, but we can ask more information based on the previous experience.
Right, like,
Okay.
for example. to the
Like
blood-
if it
the
was
blood
on
center-
the Upper East Side, then you know, you want to know what happened there.
The blood center
Yeah, we
was
can
about
set- I can
having
see.
more of a base and bigger floors and.
Oh, yeah, larger buildings under nonprofit
Well, about the
status.
use, it was about
You've
the
got
bulk of
nonprofit
the-
status,
So
the life science,
same comment as, you know, the other one.
we can,
we
More
can say
information.
something about setbacks, and like, in other words, looking at this, but in context of existing regulation.
you know what, it should be alarm, the life science
Right.
was alarming because of what happened.
But we're gonna do Jeffrey, Maria, and then we're gonna go online.
Just a couple of comments and a couple of questions. I hope everybody will recognize that that zoning is for a long time, and many of these are reactions to a 1961 zoning code that includes specific references to things like typewriter repair, that like literally don't exist anymore. So as we think about the uses we're debating today, imagine them a generation from now, that they likely will be thought of or utilized in a very different way. Framing that out there from a zoning is for the long-term perspective. Life sciences is already as of right in many parts of our district, so it's not like it doesn't exist. On micro distribution, I'm gonna work backwards, and then go into nightlife. On micro distribution, which yes, is,
What lines?
micro distribution, sorry, my lines, it's towards the end, it was the, number, 14.
Yep.
Line 294.
Yep.
Again, this gets back to my point. A generation from now, will the storage of batteries of e-bikes be a concern? So I just wonder if we'll think about our language here, because this becomes very restrictive, especially given the volume of e-bike purchases that we're seeing happening by non-delivery folks, and how this is going to inhibit a really very green way to move about the city if we expect a restriction like that to be put in effect for a generation or two. Batteries are already changing, by the way. It's the used batteries that have become are a bigger problem.
Do you have specific language on it though?
So the language then?
We need to talk about illegal
I mean,
non-certified batteries.
I think, is there a way we could come up with a certification to make it appropriate as opposed to it being a blanket objection? Because 5 years from now, we anticipate it would be improved. I can think of all the bike storage rooms that we've advocated
We
for.
add in language that specifically speaks to that, only if batteries
Yes.
certified by X, Y, or Z, and I don't know the standard, maybe just find out what the standard.
Well, there is
But
a UN standard, but they need to develop a
So
new standard.
insert the clause, prohibit
Gotcha. That makes sense.
uncertified and unlicensed e-bikes and storage.
I think the
Uncertified
key
and
is,
unlicensed?
exactly, yes.
Okay.
Well, I think uncertified, because, we don't know if there's gonna be a licensure for an individual to own an
Right.
e-bike. So I think uncertified covers everything.
Right.
All
So
right.
that should-
That's easy.
fire.
That's neat. One.
Yeah, thank you for helping me work through that. I think on the second one,
The fire instead of 64, like that.
we should just think about how retail occupancy right now is meant to, like, these micro distribution sites, they're meant to sort of be a temporary fill and activate a storefront, and question whether or not we want to prohibit that, long-term, short-term.
We're not
is-
prohibiting it. We're doing financial
Sorry.
incentives, right?
I'm not following everything you say.
To move them off the street.
Still 14.
So if somebody rents a storefront,
The incentive is not to have these e-bikes and just micro distribution centers on traffic lanes and car lanes, but instead move them inside buildings.
Is that what this says?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Offer incentives.
That's okay.
Move them off.
Thank you. I want to move on to nightlife because I don't want to take up too much time on this. Unfortunately, I have to say that as nightlife is written, I'm gonna be a no on this letter. Because as somebody who, letter,
Section.
9, nightlife, so starting at 226, it's broad strokes. And, I struggle most nights of the week getting dinner after 10 PM as somebody who, doesn't have a regular work schedule. And I think that there's people like me. And I was excited by the proposals that would allow more things to happen. And in particular, later in the evening, as I've watched New York City go to bed earlier and earlier, I'm concerned any more retraction or limitations on hospitality and nightlife will not only, given the number of people that work in these jobs in Hell's Kitchen in Chelsea, but the fact that so much of our microeconomy revolves around hospitality, not just nightlife, but hospitality also. This feels really strong and restrictive to me.
Yeah, because
The thing about
Ted,
the-
Ted and I spent a lot of time talking about this, and
This is why I
He's
wanted
sort
to
of-
raise that as I felt.
he's sort of comfortable where this came out. I mean, first of all, just a little context. So these are for venues under 200 people,
Mhm.
which often happen on side streets despite our balance. And what we're saying is, and at the moment, you can have musical entertainment, but not non-musical entertainment. So we're saying we have no problem with non-musical entertainment, expanding it that way. We have no problem.
Stand-up comedians, open mic nights, things like
That
that.
sort of stuff.
Okay.
We have no problem with your charging cover charges if you want. What we have problems with are these venues announcing shows at 6, 8, and 10. Because as we've seen in comedy clubs in our own district, or if you go down to the village, there are these massive lines of people waiting to get in because they don't allow enough time between shows. And that is where we get all the community complaints. So that is really the only piece of this we're objecting to. I'll get to dancing in a second. But again, this was sort of a compromise between Ted and me, and, we just sort of threw it out there for discussion, but, I think the lines are a problem we hear a lot of problems, and Joe can tell you about the lines outside, one of his buildings on 42nd Street, they're a problem, and that's really what we're trying to avoid, and if you find another solution to preventing lines from forming, that's all we're getting at there. Dancing, and this has come up a lot, we hear about something that is a small bar and restaurant, they suddenly allow dancing, and the residents, this happened to BLP this month.
Yeah.
It completely changes their quality of life with dancing. The music gets louder, the people get louder, they go out on the sidewalk to cool off, and they continue dancing and making noise, smoking. So again, what we tried to do is saying, we're not trying to bar incidental dancing. We're trying to bar venues that should be just quiet bars and restaurants from suddenly advertising, we have a dance floor, come and dance.
But, okay, so you are saying, support nightlife with common sense rules.
I didn't write the heading. so-
No, that's the heading, but I'm saying we could say that, we support all of that when it's a residential, commercial building.
Well, that doesn't help if it's a commercial building with residential buildings on either side. We have 1-story commercial buildings.
This also extends it for the first time into residential zone districts.
Yes,
Which is different, like, if you're on 9th or 10th, that's the existing, now you're in the mid-block, and it allows. in the mid-block.
I understand exactly what the text means and proposes, and I think that we're not even recommending nightlife districts be created as a part of the citywide zoning text, which is something we could consider. As we've advocated for further residential zoning of our neighborhood universally, much of which I broadly support, that's also restricted nightlife. So there's a conflict here. I appreciate your answers, Frank. I'm gonna think
Yeah.
about them
okay.
and.
And as I said, I was just trying to do the best job of
Sure.
synthesizing what I thought would be a lot of different views on that. I mean, we could have taken a much harder line, I think, we didn't, so.
Appreciate that.
What the conversation I had with Frank and Ted is, I use Pocket Bar as the example a lot, because it's on a side street, it's very small. And that is a neighborhood bar people go to and drink and have fun. I've been there when dancing breaks out, right? We don't want them to come in and say, you can't dance here.
You started, I'm guessing.
Maybe a Congo line or something got started. But the notion of a building like that, that's between residential buildings, that they have dancing go on, and we don't want that to stop. But we also don't want it to be advertised, promoted for, and we struggle with patron dancing, which now there's some new language that Ted and Frank gave me today, that even changes patron dancing to no advertised or promoted dancing other than in connection with other venue events. So if somebody, and Ted used the example, we have a go-go board, right? And people start dancing, that is acceptable now, under this, that we're proposing.
Is it? Sorry, but is this the, I guess the only question, is this the place, I mean, we already do this on a case by case basis. You know, decide whether, that is the fun, that we just spent, you know, how many hours.
You can go along with enforcement once this happens.
Yes.
Yeah, so the zoning change makes it such that a bar applicant could come in and say, this is now allowed,
Yeah.
and the community board doesn't have to say.
Like a current existing bar that's already on, that's the problem, it's
Yeah.
not.
But no,
Well,
Anyone.
Well, but a new applicant could still say,
Yeah,
you could
here's
still
what
say, to get, we would not recommend for your liquor license.
Yeah.
No.
someone's made this point before, if this got passed this way, the headlines would be, you can now have dancing in all kinds of venues. It happened when the cabaret laws were repealed. Everyone thought you could suddenly have dancing everywhere, and you couldn't, because you still had the zoning prohibitions against places where
So that's what
zoning.
it is.
Yeah, so now they're trying to remove the remaining prohibitions against dancing to basically allow it everywhere. Now, we may want to go along with that, but that's basically what happened. But once, even when the cabaret laws got repealed, even well-meaning operators thought you could have dancing everywhere. No one sort of focused on that nuance, and that's a lot of what we were doing, a lot of education at BLP when that happened. But without something like this to back it up, no one will ever agree to no dancing. They will just say, you know, we have to be competitive. That's exactly what we will hear.
Jeffrey, did you have other issues?
No, thank you.
Maria?
I just wanted to pull back for a second. I think you mentioned, this had borough board, and I missed what you said, I'm sorry.
Oh, just that because of the timing, the borough president needed us to take a position, all wanted to hear from everyone. Unfortunately, because of the way this was handled at the meeting, it went very long and we didn't even get to every, issue that was listed here. So I'm waiting to hear back.
You mean
from
at
Tricia
committee or
at
borough?
borough board.
Oh, at borough board.
So I have not yet heard where the meeting, like, how they concluded, unfortunately, the way I'm learning, but the way that meeting works is it can go as long as it needs to go, and many other people in attendance have other commitments, so like myself, I had to leave early, so I've not yet heard the outcome of how they're proceeding. But their approach was to, as I said, take a vote on each of the 18 items, and for many of them, they started with an allow with conditions. And a few of them I know in discussion were changed to deny unless. But all of them, of course, have conditions that people, and there was not, I would say, we took multiple votes on many of these items. So there was not consensus.
Okay.
Our little rephrase with that denying less, a lot, and we already follow that traditional thing.
Because a lot of other boards do say allow with conditions, like LPC uses that language more than deny unless, BLP uses deny unless. So different boards use different
I was
language.
gonna ask you that, Jessica, what the other boards were kind of, like, what other sections of the city were kind of, or Manhattan, were saying.
It varied quite
Oh.
significantly.
Yes.
There was,
Really?
yeah, I mean, as I said, we took multiple votes.
Yeah.
On each item, in an attempt to generate consensus.
Oh, wow.
And there were multiple where it was determined that we were not gonna be able to take a position on that as a result. And people switched votes trying to get to the place where, because they didn't want us to
Yes.
not have to take a position, or no, but frankly, like something, and that.
So I just heard really just on the street, just like resistance to this. I was curious what officially boards were, but.
As I said, they wanted to take the approach of allow, or approve, so I think the borough president was coming at this, wanting to find a way to be able to say yes to things. And that didn't happen. I know we have Roberta online, but yeah, okay, so Roberta.
Thank you. So I did, apologies if I wound up missing this at the beginning, but at the end of the letter, it notes for text being held. Was that addressed as to what actually happened with those texts? I think specifically the manufacturing use, And then there is the home office uses, not necessarily, it's technically a mix of commercial uses into residential buildings, but certain more narrow, less disruptive forms of commercial businesses. I was wondering where that landed. Based on the letter, the read is that it was negative on both of those things, but I wasn't sure what was put forth at Borough Board.
All apologies. What that is in the editing process, we were cutting and pasting so much. There was this language in the letter that we hadn't really figured out where to put it yet. So it's put at the end of the letter with a note that says, we're gonna.
Somewhere in
figure out
118.
Where to stick this back into those 18 line items that exist. So that language is from a first draft of, we're now on, I think, draft 7. So this is the first draft language that is sustained through all the editing, but hasn't landed in the letter someplace yet. Does that help understand why that language is there?
And-
It's just me being a crazy editor.
No, it's a holding.
The holding. There's some
It's
language
holding
that
language, but that is ultimately supporting language in the letter that is
You
opposed
agree
to
on
all
the
of
language,
these.
Yes.
Okay, that is my understanding. Reading DCP's comments specifically on some of the smaller scale home office uses, was there any discussion ultimately about like how a potential get to yes there with less disruptive home uses, or was it pretty strongly just opposed? There's no possible way to make this work. I
think that the way that we approached it is to say customer facing businesses that have lots of deliveries would be problematic. If someone's working from home, and like, let's say you're a lawyer and you have a legal assistant come in and work in your home with you, then that didn't seem problematic. But if you are a bakery that is now on the 2nd floor and you have the flour being delivered in the morning and the donuts being sold in the afternoon, so you have a lot of foot traffic in and out, that, or there was an example of buttons, a button salesperson who had a delivery of massive boxes of buttons that broke in the hallway and cascaded down the stairwell and destroyed, like, and caused chaos in the building, right? So from that example, we came down to the customer facing, active volume in the hallways was the concern we had. People sharing office space at home and an employee coming in, working for the day, going out for lunch, coming back, not a big deal. But customer facing and volume is the issue.
It sounds like that is apartment buildings, and I apologize if I am missing this. Citywide, could that potentially apply to smaller residences, so places where it would ultimately be less disruptive and therefore more of an appropriate use?
Certain things are actually exempt out in this zoning from like certain classes of residences.
And
This
those
was
were
more
exempted in what DCP proposed here?
Yes.
Okay, I understand that now. I think one other question I had, and this kind of just piggybacks off Jeffrey's comment about the nightlife. DCP indicated the sort of lobby use as being key or vital to their proposal with the like nightlife specific amendment. And what I am hearing from members of who have been kind of working on this for a long time is that the lobby does not matter because people will line up on the street anyway. One, is that true? And two, if you have proper enforcement, does that change anything? And if we're calling for enforcement, would it then be more appropriate to be more flexible if we can have better enforcement?
Well, I think it depends on the size of the lobby. I mean, what we ended up suggesting is it's perfectly fine to have show times as long as no one waits on the sidewalk and you have space to accommodate everyone inside. And I mean, we have some of these venues. Paul and I talked about West Bank Cafe here that has a cabaret venue in the basement, but people can wait in the upstairs bar until they have to go downstairs. So any setup like that, if there is an actual waiting room, I think we're okay with it, but we don't want, a 3-foot vestibule to be considered a solution because you're still gonna have a line.
Okay, and I just want to make sure that delineation is reflected in the letter, and I apologize if I am missing it anywhere.
So that's on lines 236 to 238.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, that is, thank you. That is really helpful. I think that those represented, I'm pretty sure that that captured my my initial concerns with the letter.
So unless you put the queue in the parking lane, right?
Give away that free parking.
Yeah.
It's great.
I'd love to bring this to a close, but Christine, you had a question.
I had one, going back to the micro distribution.
Again, line item or something.
Yeah, 294.
Thank you.
I think what we said is offer financial incentives to move micro distribution business off the street. I'd like to be more explicit and say move the micro distribution, including the loading,
Blah, 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 blah,
unloading,
blah,
and the
right.
parking. Because you know, what we're going to start seeing is people say, oh, we have the business inside. And which was Amazon, and then everything is outside, right? So we need to have the build,
Loading, parking and distribution.
yeah,
Is that enough, those 3 words?
yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
Does it, so on that, does it need to reference a lease or anything like that? Because I think,
Yeah.
do we want it tied to, like, I'm just trying to think of like, you know, remember those 15-minute delivery things that took over in 2020 and 21? Right, and those were just a flash in the pan, but do we need something tied to a use? People are gonna, like, those bikes are gonna take up space outside, that's right, those
Well,
workers are
that's
not
what I'm
following the
saying.
rule. I know that, right, but there's always gonna be folks who aren't following the rules, so is there a way we can codify the use by referencing a lease, or that there has to be
What do you mean by this?
the purpose of the lease is for this use?
Right.
I don't know if that's possible, but I'm just trying to think of
I
like
don't know
a,
that you
Maybe
can
the phrase,
codify that in this.
lease premises as a general term, and
Yeah,
then
lease
how
premises.
to craft it into.
right, because maybe then if they're taking over, you know, build space on the side or.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to note for the members here and online that I was very encouraged because DCP staff, especially the guy who wrote it, was in charge of it. They really wanted to hear specific solutions from us on how to modify something. I think as they're a little more sanguine than everything's gonna get passed so quickly. Why do they spend so much time with us? And they took notes. I know the city official is totally full of baloney and partially, and they were like ding, 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 ding notes. So I think that's a helpful thing.
They specifically asked if, because they liked our conversation on ticketed versus showtime and what solutions we might offer. So I might even send Matt West to watch, which, the language that Frank and Ted have put here, say this is kind of where we landed on this
Right.
topic, because they were struggling with how to deal with that, Jeffrey, to address your point. They were concerned, like, we don't want to.
They went back and forth in different language.
But we don't know how to address the concerns that have been raised. And they used ticketed and showtime as words, and we were hesitant about that, and now we have some different language. So I made him pre-send that little paragraph to Matt, just because he asked me to.
Great, I think are we ready to take vote? Thank you, Paul, for your work on this.
So then Joe and Matt and JD and Christine and Jessica and Carrie and Frank and Ted.
So I move that with ongoing and further amendments to clarify the section specifically, so we order it properly, that we adopt this joint letter.
Second. Christine, all in favor? Thank you. Online? I think that was fine. Opposed? Abstaining? Present not eligible? Okay. All right, thank you, Paul.
So I can
Okay.
vote yes or no at the full board, that was that extensive.
Well, of course.
And as a reminder, we have still one more city of yes, that we can expect. Thank you, Paul, for your work on this. Moving on, the second agenda item is, to provide an update on the NYCHA development project. I'd asked that, Chelsea Land Use and, HHHS take the lead on sharing an update with all of you tonight. I do want to acknowledge that the EIS, which has been something we've been waiting for, the environmental impact, study, the draft, was,
There's cold water in the fridge, I know it's.
sorry, the scope,
Yeah,
thank you. The scope was released, on January 8th. when they released it, they indicated a timeline that that is and was very challenging. I say is because it does conflict with 2 of our 3 public meetings. We've expressed our dissatisfaction with that. The timeline for comment was also such that full board would not have an opportunity to reflect on this. Thankfully, they have pushed back the time for comment, and I want to thank everyone who reached out to electeds and made our push and NYCHA themselves to say that this was not acceptable. So the deadline for comment has been extended until March 8th, giving us a little bit more time. And meanwhile, we will, I'm sure the committees will be focused on making sure we have representation at the meetings. So if you don't see some of your colleagues or we experience some schedule changes over the next 6 weeks, it is largely to accommodate these hearings. So with that, I'm going to turn it to Carrie and Jeffrey to start from the land use perspective, seeing as.
You also want to tell them about your decision?
Sure, so hopefully.
I
Thank you, yeah, sorry, so I think, we sent a communication out, to the committee, but I'm delighted to announce, if you were not yet aware, that Jeffrey is gonna be taking on as co-chair of Chelsea Land Use. Obviously, in my new role, I vacated that position, and we're thrilled to have him and his tenacity as we go up against this. What's he doing? Hanging around the hoop?
Move on. Former chair gets 1 year on exec.
Thank you, Jeffrey. So anyway, we're delighted that Jeffrey has accepted this role, and I know will be a great partner to Carrie in leading the committee's work. And so I've asked them to kick off tonight with some remarks about the process from the Chelsea Land Use perspective, and then we'll turn it to Joe and Maria to hear from their committee's perspective, where we are and what we can anticipate for next steps. Jeffrey, Carrie, I understand.
All right.
We're gonna...
So, hi, here's our update. As everyone knows, once upon a time, there was a NYCHA Chelsea working group, which issued a recommendation. Then an RFP was issued based on this recommendation, and related in essence were chosen by NYCHA. And then the final plan they announced in a press release to the public had a proposal that was not a recommendation of the working group, and that's the demolition plan. And I think we can all probably agree that this is when, the swirl started. So CLU and HHHS quickly drafted a letter that went to the full board with a list of all the questions that we had about land use, tenant protections, the survey methodology, community space, open space, etc. It was quite a few pages. We did get a response to many of the questions, but as you all also know, we are still actively seeking a response to many others. I think you can see that in the frustration of the people, the community who are showing up to our meetings. So we are actively seeking a response, and we have been having discussions with our electeds as to which meetings we involve them in now with NYCHA to get answers faster. So adding a little bit of pressure in the future. As to the community, NYCHA residents seem to think that the community board has taken a position on the proposed demolition plan. We have not taken a position. We are seeking information and doing our committee work. Nor is it true that we are holding up the process. CLU in particular is doing exactly what we would do for any land use action. And we're doing more, both committees. We're meeting as a small group monthly with stakeholders, including CLU co-chairs, HHHS co-chairs, the board chair, and Jesse, representatives from Related, NYCHA, and Essence. And these meetings are ongoing. So far, we've had 3, and our next meeting is January 29th. We continue to emphasize the need for clear and precise information, especially regarding what we've heard from NYCHA residents, such as survey results. We have also met with the NYCHA Tenants Association presidents to hear their concerns, Darlene and Miguel. They voiced a desire to work with the community to get this project approved, and also voiced concerns that there was not enough being done in the interim to address tenant concerns. There will be a discussion regarding this interim plan, which has been referred to as the Meanwhile Plan, and tenant rights, which is upcoming at HHHS. So I'm sure Joe and Maria will speak to that. We also had a meeting with tenants who have expressed concern with the project or had outright objections. We heard over and over again that the information is inconsistent from NYCHA, and there's some concern that those expressing opposition are being kept out of tenant meetings. We brought these concerns to NYCHA directly. We also meet regularly, just the four co-chairs of two of each committee, to make sure we're working on parallel paths, keeping agenda items separate and relevant to the respective responsibilities of each committee. So for everyone, it might be helpful to watch both HHHS and CLU when Chelsea NYCHA is on the agenda to get the full picture. So we're definitely working together. Now, for land use specifically, this is what we have upcoming. As Jessica mentioned, on January 8th, NYCHA issued a notice of intent and a draft scope of work to prepare a draft EIS. They attended our January CLU meeting last week to present this draft scope. CLU's assigned committee members sections of the draft scope to study and suggest additions. And at our February meeting, we will discuss all of these suggestions and formalize them in a letter for the full board to vote on in March. So these would be ideas, anything that's not there. Because we want to make this as, we don't want to miss anything. We'll also be asking respective committees to give us specific feedback related to the final draft EIS, such as transportation, ACEs, WPE. So please keep that in the back of your minds that when that is published, we'll ask you to have that on your agenda. And if anyone has any suggestions on the draft scope, it is available for you to read on the website, and we would welcome them. I was going to mention the extension to March 8th, but Jessica already did. So that's it from us, from CLU.
Carrie, and when is your next meeting?
Our next
February.
meeting is, our next meeting is February, sorry,
Yeah.
no, wait, yeah,
February 20.
I have to
February
look,
20th.
February 20. So from the February
I would just-
20 meeting, we will draft a letter that will go to full board in March, before March 8th.
The only thing I'll add is, since Carrie made me give out assignments at my first meeting as CLU co-chair to all of the committee members, I would say that the draft scope of work is only 65 pages, and so you should all read it now as well.
Very short.
It is actually, it's a useful document
For those
to
things.
digest, to begin to get your brain thinking about what is being proposed.
And to that point, not only do we encourage you to, there are other committees who, like, your work directly relates to this, and if you're gonna want to be able to talk about this in 3 months, 6 months, 10 years from now about the implications, now is the chance to say, where was it at the beginning? So, find your section if you need to, if you can't read the whole thing. I have been carrying it around for the last week. But really do ask that you take a look. It looks like there's some questions in the room. Leslie was.
Go ahead,
Paul.
let
Well, I wanted to start with a question. Is everyone familiar with the process of scope to draft EIS to EIS? Like, that timeline may be helpful to describe to everybody, so we understand what is the scoping process now? Where are we now in that process?
Sure, Carrie, do you want to speak to that, or?
Yeah, I mean, this is the very beginning. So this is basically a skeleton, if you want to think of it like that. And it feels, it feels like that. So what we want to do at this point is make sure that we are asking for them to study, everything we can think of that's relevant. So I'm trying to think of an example. Paul, give an example of something that you sent me.
I love the idea of the skeleton, because if you don't have a hand on the skeleton, it's not going to be studied in the EIS.
That's right.
Right, so right now, we want to build the skeleton, we want to make sure it has 5 fingers, 10 toes. All of those components want to be there, that they get studied, because if there's no hand on the skeleton, the hand doesn't get studied.
And therefore could not be implemented.
It can't be implemented as part of the plan going forward. So this is an opportunity for us to raise any issue we might have. It might be setback from street, it might be height, shadow effect, it might be school seats, it might be anything that might be impacted by a massive housing development that's going to change our zoning, that's going to change the culture of the neighborhood, that's going to change the mix of the demographics. How are we as a community going to be impacted? So think through that. Could be bike lanes, anything that can come in. If we don't raise it now in the scoping process,
They
It
won't
doesn't get
study
into
it.
the environmental impact study.
So I have a question, when you do the scoping, is there a document which compares, what is today and what is proposed for tomorrow? Is there?
But not in detail.
Right, so there is on our website, or soon to be on our
Okay.
website, a presentation that they gave on January 16th about the environmental review, and they identified, basically, they're looking at 4 alternatives, and they have identified each of those alternatives with building height, to Joe's point, not in a lot of detail, but building height, number of units, affordable mix, et cetera, and if you lay them out, you are comparing them side by side, and they have some summary charts that include that. We have requested repeatedly more information to align those charts with maps, more details, et cetera.
Because the metrics are different. If you're building more than 50% 2 bedrooms, that's a different impact on whether it's market or affordable, either or. These are, none of this is being disclosed. That's why it's so frustrating to work with this.
Leslie, you wanted to ask something?
Yeah, this is not about demolition, no demolition, the scope or anything like that. Something that is quite concerning, and I'm gonna go back, I don't know if the board I know the board has not taken a position on it, is this was way back when, as Carrie said, there was an RFP put out. And many companies came and they all went for the RFP and they, kind of, yeah, they doled it out. And one was chosen based on obviously what they were proposing and the money and everything. So now that company that was chosen over a specific plan has come back and said, we can't do it for this amount. We're gonna do it for this, this way over amount, which I understand that happens, there's inflation, stuff, numbers get inflated, that's understandable. But what to me is like, was there ever a thought to go back to RFP? Because it seems like I just want to preserve the RFP process, because it feels like if a big developer can come in, it's kind of like, I can promise anything. And they're gonna say yes to it, and I can go back next month and say, we're not doing it, and I'm still gonna get it. To me, that's like perverse, it's a perversion of the system.
I had asked that question at Chelsea Land Use, and we got a response from.
Oh, okay, perfect.
It was our response. Every RFP.
Joe responded like, wow.
Every RFP has the ability for there to be changes to be made, right?
Yes.
But I've never in my entire career seen an RFP that was for X and now you're to A. Like, in other words, 100% of the requirements of the RFP are not being met. And that to me is extraordinary. It's one thing to say, you have to build 600 units and you come back and you can do 500 or 750, or here's an example, that's company for us. We had an RFP for the Chelsea NYCHA 401 West 25th Street. The developer got it, the developer, I'm sorry, we all worked with it. They came back multiple times and said, these income bands, we can't make the project work financially. We have to include some higher income bands. And we debated, discussed it, and in fact, they actually disclosed the numbers to us. And the board said, yes, we will support a change, but it was a change that went from like incremental.
Right.
It was not, we can't do this, so it must be 50%.
We can expect it, you expect things to change as it goes, but this is so egregious to me that it's gonna hurt the process, or it's gonna like kind of invalidate the process a little bit.
Do you want to respond to that directly?
I don't know.
I want to stay on this topic for 1 second. So, what NYCHA said was, I brought it up as a question, and NYCHA's response was, it's within our purview of the RFP process to make these adjustments. We made these adjustments, and it's within our purview, and they left it at that.
That's crazy.
It is great,
And
but part of my struggle with asking that question even is that if we were to say, this RFP is rejected, like we did with the Siemens YMCA, right? We said that project is not working the way the RFP is, put it back out, right? If we say that again, now I would want to get input from NYCHA residents more so, because that's going to elongate the process that they're living in.
I understand the
So
repercussions.
whether we take a hard line on saying this RFP was not met and this RFP needs to go back out again, we need to reissue the RFP because it's so different because of the demolition. That is a conversation I think we would need to have, to see if we want to take that position or not.
Yeah, no, I understand, but we were talking about process and.
And I would add though, that part of the rationale for how they thought, because they didn't they may have decided in a, corporate boardroom somewhere that this is what they wanted to do. But
Yes.
they would say that they engaged the public, they had 30 listening sessions with residents during this process, they offered options. We know people who participated in those sessions and said that did happen, that was a legitimate process, and that led to, and that's where this gets complicated, this vote/survey, where then residents participated and residents chose this option, which, so as an evolution of the project, it makes sense that you would hear from, like, there was a process. They have now not been transparent on the survey and we.
But it's not even the, I don't even, right now, it's not even what happened, it's not the process, like what is decided, it's more the budget, like now, it's even just the money number is from what you said you could give for this number.
It's triple.
To what, yes, to what you can't, so it's not really, I understand that, and that's not really, my concern is, you said you could do X for this, and that's blown out of the water. I mean, I would think that, yes, I would love to see another RFP process and see what could really be done for that money, or, because now it seems like someone just got it. I mean, I could say, oh, I could do it for $10, like, you know what I mean?
Well, that is one of the alternatives, is a no zoning change, and they will be studying that, and we should be sure that we're asking the right kinds of questions around.
Thank you.
But even with the no zoning change, it's still demolition.
Sure.
So there's still a
Yes.
demolition factor
Yes.
that was not part of the original working
Right.
outcome.
Well, not
Yeah.
part, it was specifically, we got together, the community came together on this working group via the council of the electeds, because there was incredible opposition to demolition. And the goal in that working group was to reconcile all these factions in the Chelsea NYCHA tenantry to a plan. So it wasn't like there was, what's being proposed is the opposite of why we came together.
Yeah.
Our council member, then council member Corey Johnson, supported a plan to demolition. The tenants and everyone else went crazy. Now, I think what I find more than curious here in the process is if in fact they got the RFP, they do their in-depth study, which is appropriate, and they come and they say, this is not gonna work properly. Why wasn't there immediate back out to the broad public,
Yeah.
not just inside the box of, this is the survey, it's gonna take less, whatever, trying to convince people. There was no public discussion. The entire hallmark of the prior process was this major public discussion. And that's the part that doesn't wash with me no matter what. We're dealing with the hand we're dealt. I'm totally engaged with that, figuring out how to make something work. But at the same time, I think any letter we write as part of the EIS is to say, there was no public discussion from this month to that month, irrespective of all kinds of internal things with NYCHA tenants. It was never disclosed until it was a press release. That fact cannot go. We have to note that for HUD. It's not going anywhere.
Thank
Well,
you
I
very
mean, I
much.
have a section of the letter called process, so we'll make sure that it's in there. But yeah, so we'll love to take any comments from people who will read this scope, draft scope.
We do have a lot of comments online, but first Bert, and then we'll go online.
Yeah, I am not immersed in all the details, the financial details. But
Because they don't exist.
That's just,
Nothing's
yeah.
been disclosed.
What I'm trying to, a context, and I know we're going back to 2019 when we first started. the
2019,
discussion.
2021.
Right, okay, and the goal was initially to rehab, modify the existing buildings with the existing apartments.
Yes.
That was the original goal, okay? Currently, and I don't think, and Joe, I defer to you, okay? Now NYCHA has another program that I don't think existed at that time. And they're making a big deal out of it, where there's some kind of ability to raise money through bonds, issuing of bonds. And like they've talked about, and it's all for rehab of existing buildings. So there was a development down in Sheepshead Bay that went up in the Bronx. I'm not pointing to the Bronx, no, up in the Bronx. Okay,
This way.
Up in the,
You were right the first time.
This is the ball.
that's the way.
Yeah.
Right.
Is that north?
Yes.
Okay, up in the Bronx is northeast. The Baychester houses went through this. And then Edenwald, which is a much larger project.
With large developers.
And yeah, but they have an ability to raise bonds, to sell bonds, raise money to help the existing structures, which I don't think existed 3 years ago.
It did not.
This is something new. So I guess within that context, why can't we just say, whoa. Can this be applied to these three developments? You know, okay, the original didn't work, okay, but now we have a new kind of a process that maybe will work. Has anybody said, let's look at that?
What I bring to my.
It would throw everything upside down.
I don't think so. What I bring to my colleagues is that I was the co-chair of the finance committee at the Chelsea Working Group, right? And we had a line item, line by line, that everything that had to be renovated, replaced, all building systems, elevators, resiliency, flood, insulation, you name it, line by line, right? I would have expected that when Related came in and said, you know, this whole thing, and we were informed by NYCHA via a planning study they did, inspection study they did, showing all the deficiencies in the buildings. Here's what you have to address. And I was told we have to solve for $346 million, right? Fine. Now, Jeffrey said there's not a lot of money. I agree. So I'm just going with the task we had, right? And then we figured out how to finance that. So if Related, with all their wherewithal, came and said it's not 346 million, it's 600, 700, 800. I would have thought they'd come back and say, you know, here's what this NYCHA put in this RFP. Now, here's what we think it is, and here's our problem. How do we do this? And we want to work with you, community tenants, to figure out how to solve for $900 million, or whatever it is. The fact that it was right to the end, and then the plan was sold that new construction is faster, and the whole process will happen quicker for the tenants. I know now by looking at some of the documents that it's a 10-year plan plus another 10 years. So we're talking construction through 2040, a combo of the NYCHA stuff and the mixed income buildings. But the fact that we are not, I mean, no, Carrie was fantastic at the meeting, and we were all, and Jeffrey did. When NYCHA said, we're here as a courtesy, I almost fell off my chair. No, you're at a community board committee meeting. When we asked for the survey, which for the first time in the actual document, they don't call a vote, they call it a survey. They said they're not going to disclose this information. Like, it was the most bizarre thing. It's like, as if like there's some they created more distrust. Well, there was a question by one of the committee members, David, I think. Will the new buildings, if it's renovation or if it's new construction, will it be green or not? And they hedged back and forth and said, we will comply with city regulations. All they had to say was, the law requires they will be green with green roofs and solar, whatever. One after the other like that. So I think the problem is, if that's what we're getting as a public body, imagine you're a tenant, and Maria's had many cases that she and I talked about, people she's seeing differently in her professional capacity, or being told you're moving in October. You better start packing now for November. I've had tenants.
Excuse me, that's the October that already passed.
Yeah.
I was being told that last year by tenants who live there.
I've had tenants come out to my office who are relatives, they're relatives, people that are in our buildings, whatever, and they want to know, my mother's told she really has to be packed by the end of the year. This is going to start in construction. That sort of thing is very disturbing to me, because there are people who are elderly, disabled, all kinds of issues there.
Well, the first building is for senior housing, that's the one that's going down.
Well, that's the current proposal, which is crazy.
So we have more questions. We also, I want to still hear from HHHS on this. Are there any questions specifically related to land use and what Carrie shared among the folks, the panelists in the room, on Zoom, excuse me? So Marty, did you have a question, or Roberta, specifically on the land use approach that Carrie outlined?
This is very informational, which is simply, I'm looking at the Dropbox right now. I'm seeing the presentation on the scope of work, but I'm not sure if the draft scope is available. Is it available at a particular place? If members of the public tuning in would like to see it, is there a place to find it?
So there's a dedicated page, and it's not in your Dropbox, I apologize, I thought I put everything in there. But we have a dedicated page on this project, and you can get to it from our homepage. It's the second item down, and we add on to it as we get new documents, so that certainly has the scope, the actual scope document and the notice of intent, the presentations that were provided, both for the scope, and then also we listed this presentation for the meanwhile plan that's yet to be actually publicly presented at the community board, but will be shortly.
Thank you. Marty, did you have a question on land use specifically?
Yeah, a couple of comments, permit me, please. Thank you. The scope of work, in its no zoning change seems to imply, I'm working my way through the document. It's weird, I think, in some ways. It seems to imply that capital improvements or rehab isn't included in the no zoning change document. In the document where there's no change in the buildings, in the version where there's no change in the buildings.
I think that's alternate one, which is just no change at all. That becomes their control group. And then alternate 2, 3, and 4 are the actual changes.
Yeah.
Right, but the one with the no changes, it seems to me, should explicitly include capital improvements.
No, they have to do that.
Yeah.
They have, Marty, they have to show no change as a baseline for EIS comparison. So it would always be said that if nothing happens whatsoever, here's what it is. That's standard in an EIS scope document.
Yeah, well,
Marty, are you asking, should we include a request for another proposal that is just capital improvements and rehab?
wasn't that the original thing that we had?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
the answer is yes to that.
So that would be
Yeah.
us requesting a fifth option. And I think there are
No, it's
a few more.
It's there.
Repairs with no demolition is not included.
I didn't
I thought-
see it, but I'm still working my way through it.
So I took a
Renovation.
note of that, Marty. So we'll circle back to that.
In my initial reading of the first half of the document, they conflate, as Joe did, the votes, or no, as Jessica did, the vote survey stuff. And that's a big problem for us, isn't it? But the document confuses those two issues. And finally, in the part that I was asked to read, and I have to go back to, they seem to be saying that we're not going to do anything more than what's minimally required by law according to SECRA manual. And I think there's other stuff that we want, and that's what you were saying to each other a few minutes ago. But the document seemed, on my first impression, to be that legalistic stuff that we're going to comply with the laws and that's all we're going to do. I sort of saw that in several of the statements in the document. It upset me, actually.
Thank you, Marty. Okay, we're gonna move. We know that there are people in the public with their hands up. I'd like to move to HHHS for you to share your perspective.
I'm going to let, Joe carry this,
Okay.
but I will say, I do have the notice of intent in front of me, and it does have a section for, on page 6, it mentions the proposed action. And on page 9, it mentions proposed action alternatives, and A is no action. Which I think is what,
I think Marty's suggesting that there be an option to study what repairs but no demolition would include.
Oh,
Which was
it's
the
the
original, yeah.
oh, okay,
Which would be the original RFP.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Joe, we'll turn it to you,
Yeah.
and then just remember, we have folks in the.
So HHS has taken up so far, the first issue was tenant protection, to make sure that all the tenant protection requirements and regulations that we negotiated in the Chelsea Working Group would carry over to a new proposal, irrespective if it were renovation, a combination of renovation and new construction, or all new construction. And NYCHA came to a meeting in December, right, Jesse? December?
No, it's not December.
November. In November, and they made, and we.
Chair stays on exec.
Right, they made a presentation, right? And they went through item by item, affirming the protections. So we felt very good about that. However, they were then followed by Lucy Newman from the Legal Aid Society, who represented, who was the co-chair of the Tenant Protection Committee, Tenant Rights Committee. And she noted an important point, that the rights that were negotiated flow from the existing leases. And if someone has a lease, you can have a relocation agreement and go from unit A to unit B temporarily and come back, or go to a third unit. And your lease is how you are connected to the property. When there's demolition, the leases are extinguished. So it doesn't mean that it can't be figured out, but that was a key issue. And NYCHA was sort of saying, oh, that's a thing we have to look at. And like, the idea that it's not embodied in what agreement, that's a key issue for us. So at least I feel that on the record, we have NYCHA stating in public, on our YouTube stuff, that they're gonna be protections. The next thing we want to talk about were the interim repairs, which they refer to as the meanwhile plan, which covers security, some basic work in apartments, and extermination. And I was sick at the December, Maria was sick, canceled, January, we were available, but the Jamar from Essence was ill and related was not available.
It's literally been.
So we're talking about that in February, and I think we're gonna get some information. The problem is, and we've heard from multiple tenants, both pro and con on this, there's no clarity as to what is the document that's gonna govern the repairs. Under what authority will NYCHA give to related, in essence? The answer from NYCHA was, it's gonna be part of the agreement we have, and I said, well, before you have the final agreement, can you give them license to do this work and then determine what it is? We did get a presentation, it's posted on the website, it's still very vague. And again, there were meetings, for example, with PS4, the police, the housing police, which we were informed about changing. And we had an initial discussion from NYCHA, or one of our meetings, that it's gonna require video cameras and TVs in the lobbies, and so, like, it was not from NYCHA, from Essence. So we don't really have a clear, here is a date certain, here's a schedule, here's what's happening for the major repairs happening.
This is temporary for the existing.
This is all about just basic interim, keeping the place livable. And I think our biggest issue here is we've asked for information, like Terry's noted. The demographics, something as simple as how many apartments of what size in each building today? How many are occupied? How many are vacant? Now, your proposal, how many will be of which size? And then also, how many and what income bands will be produced in the new housing? None of this has been put forth. It is a concern because as part of the project with PACT, you do something called right sizing. If a single elderly person is in a 3-bedroom apartment, as part of this conversion of Section 8, they go to a 1-bedroom apartment or a studio, most likely a 1-bedroom, right? We don't know what's gonna happen in the future, so that means we could have a major demographic shift in the numbers of current NYCHA units. There are currently 1 studios, 1s, 2s, 3s, 4-bedroom apartments. We don't know any of this information. So that's concerning. And so as we've been trying to thread through it, we just don't have enough information to be able to respond. And the tenants that come to our meetings, some are disruptive, but the majority are not. And over the past, I would say 3 or 4 months, they've gotten more coherent, they're speaking clearer about what the issues are. And it keeps coming to us that it's just not clear as to what is the plan, how it will be executed. And for example, the idea of the first building that would happen is you would relocate everybody out of the senior citizen building where people are mostly in their 70s, 80s, and 90s, temporarily off-site, not into a new building. That seems to be beyond a problematic. Like Hudson Guild, we relocated off-site during construction. We brought this up as that's a no-starter. They got to remain. They serve not just the NYCHA community, they serve our broader Health Kitchen and Chelsea community. So there's these things that we're trying to thread through one by one, and we're somewhat successful, but not fully. So when there's a chart like Christina has, here's the before and after, it doesn't give you the full information of what before and after means and what the impact is on the broader community. And the last part is, I think there's a broad range of conditions. I know there's a broad range of conditions in NYCHA apartments. Some are in horrible shape, some are in bad shape, some are in very decent shape. And it's all being tarred with the same brush. They're about to fall down. These buildings, some of them are the same age as Penn South. And no one is saying Penn South's got to come down tomorrow. Now, Penn South was much better maintained over years, but it doesn't mean that the structure of a building and the ability to do a gut renovation of a building is not possible. And I go back and forth trying to work with our council member or my colleagues, talking about we have to come up with an alternative plan. Maybe there's a combination of new construction and renovation that could happen on these campuses that gets everybody back in that same tent. Because the biggest thing I want to give to my colleagues in this process, we actually forged a consensus among all these disparate groups in the community to sign on to a plan. And with that press release in July, it's been blown away. I know that the Legal Aid Society, for example, will probably litigate
Yes.
against this. I don't want a plan that's a minor litigation. I want something that we can all get our heads around, our arms around. So let's get it done. Other groups have felt iced out. You know, so I just say this is we have to get down to it and start working with it. That's my general spiel on this.
Penn South is actually a good example for what you were talking about, Joe. We did a gut rehabilitation of our HVA system, which required it was done while residents were in their apartments. It was a $150 million. Yeah, it's screwing us. $150 million job.
Bert, you got a question? And then Christine.
Yeah, one question, it's not about the moment now, it's, say if it's all going into place in some way, shape or form. They're talking, NYCHA is talking about when somebody moves into their new apartment, it's public, the apartment is only, the ground is still owned by, public housing.
NYCHA always owns the land. They
Owns
lease
the
it.
land, okay? The person moving into the apartment from previously in a NYCHA building, it will be section 8, okay? Now, I used to know section 8 as something attached to an individual.
No.
But now they're talking about, and I want clarification, that this section 8 will be attached to the apartment. So when that person dies, moves, becomes wealthy, wins the lottery, so that apartment is not lost to public housing. They will still have somebody in there with a section 8.
So there are two
Yes.
types of section 8, two types of section 8.
Okay. I didn't
One
know
that is
This I didn't
portable,
know.
one that is portable, now called housing choice vouchers, HCV. Those, a tenant gets it and they can take it and move it someplace else if they want.
Right,
The other type is called project-based, now called PVDs, project-based vouchers. That's attached to an apartment and it's subject to a contract.
okay.
And the contract is with HUD and related, right? And it is 30 years and that they can be renewed again. But the thing that we've heard some of our opponents in this process, some of the project opponents in this process say, that means it goes away. Well, no, it doesn't. Because when NYCHA leases the land, well, not NYCHA holds the land, they lease the buildings and the development rights to relate it, they put a regulatory agreement in a deed restriction that requires affordability and perpetuity.
Okay,
So that overrides the whole thing, right? But, and the one thing that happens here, and the reason that the board endorsed this whole section 8 thing, in section 9, which is the subsidy through the housing authority and through HUD, buildings that have that kind of subsidy cannot get a private mortgage, whether it's a bond or a bank mortgage. They're prohibited by the Affordable Housing Act of 1937, right? If it's section 8, you can get a mortgage, and that meant you could now borrow money like Penn South did for their renovation and put a mortgage on the buildings. So we as a board and a community decided and supported section 9 public housing being converted to section 8 RAD for rental assistance administration. And why is Legal interested in this at all? The RAD program, rental assistance administration, takes section 8 vouchers. And this program says, you private sector developer, we want to keep you in this program for subsidies. You will hire a consultant to get comparable market rents in the area in which this project is happening. And if you can prove it to us and bring these various reports back, we will approve not the normal section 8 rent, let's say for a 1-bedroom, 1,400. We'll approve a version of the market rent. So when Related acquired Manhattan Plaza, they went through the process and they got HUD to approve $5,200 a month, 2 bedrooms. This is a guaranteed source of income to Related. And that guaranteed source of income, a big chunk of it goes to support these new mortgages. But let's not think for a moment that no one's making money in this process. It is direct making money. One last thing that we haven't really unpacked fully is that the NYCHA tenants will be concentrated to 3 buildings.
Yes.
And there's a real question raised by lots of folks looking at this.
3 buildings on each campus.
It's a 2 on 1, 2 on 1, 1 on the other, right? And the problem there is that there's a fair share issue, there's a fair housing issue that we are concentrating the lowest income and the most diverse of people of color into certain buildings and then developing these mixed buildings in a different way. So that's another big issue that's percolating out there well beyond us, but the broader citywide housing groups concerned about that, as opposed to a fully integrated community.
Hey, Christine, you have to get a question?
Yeah, it seems that we've heard a lot about people being, moved and then moved again or moved off-site, et cetera. Is it something we should be advocating that people move only once and they move it on the campus? So whenever they're moving, they go there, they go into their final location and there is no multiple displacement and off-site.
Well, one of the things was raised to us, which you don't even have information yet, is that Related stated that in their 80/20s in the neighborhood, they would like to be able to use the affordable units for relocation for years. Well, that would be a problem because we've had many 80/20s
Right,
in their inclusionary and they're permanent.
you're supposed to have somebody else, that's.
Right, and that is right. So one of the things is that we don't, I think that's a nuanced question.
Right.
Because I don't know until we have information as to occupied, vacant, families, how do you do the relocation even? But I do know one thing, the seniors, we cannot have them more than once.
I think generally, because also what I heard in the one
Maybe,
communication is that people say, oh, most of the people will be relocated. Like,
under this plan, everybody.
No,
Well-
so there is, if you read the
yes,
documents, it states that the assumption is that there will be 120, let's call them units, right? Because there could be multiple people in that unit, right? That assume sort of interim relocation. So while this proposal says they're gonna build a new building before there's any demo, right? And then move people into that. Even during the meanwhile plan, this assumes, interim plan, what have you, people will be relocated because they are considered to be not healthy enough, they're made a special request, et cetera. So
Within the compensation.
exactly, so that's not what that is, there is a recognized that a certain number of people will be relocated, so that would assume a twice move for certain people. However, the proposal still does say, and again, I'm speaking from the proposal, that repairs can be made for most people, right, in their current units, and that then the vast majority of people, separate from that 120 units, wouldn't move until there's a new building on the campus to move into. This is what the proposal says, right? Absolutely.
so I think vast, it's I think we need to, because when we heard all the people, when I was listening to all the people, their real worry is to lose their house, right? So how do we put some?
And how do they get trapped and where they go?
And then, where are they going to go? They say, well, if you move me, I'm never going to come back. So they are petrified at the idea that they are not going to come back. And I think we need to put something there that prevents people to be moved and moved offsite.
That would be, that's called a temporary and permanent relocation agreement.
Right.
And what you're describing, the fear, is what happened in the Upper West Side urban renewal. There were thousands of families moved off-site who never came back. And this is a standard urban renewal thing.
Yes.
And the thing here we have to be, hopefully manage it through it. That's the thing, is that we can't allow that even to be entertained.
Yes.
That is also driving the fear
Yes,
in people's, in these households. No matter what you say, for every person that gets up and says, well, I have bad security in my building, so it should be demolished, which is kind of a bizarre thing to say. When it comes time to move, I know having done, Clinton Housing is at maybe 800 relocations, temporary and permanent. People at the last moment back out of it, they freak out, you're in court. Even when it's all ironclad and they're protected, they're human beings involved.
right.
So this is not like,
So I think that's, to me, this is one of the big things that we need to put in our.
Jesse, you want to,
I'll talk offline, because I just really appreciated Joe's very, that was very helpful, and then I have follow-ups to that, but I'll ask him.
and clearly, we wanted this to be a level set for the exec, especially with the release of the scope of work. This is gonna be something we are also very deeply entrenched in.
Yeah.
For the long haul.
Can I ask a quick question? I don't need a real answer to the question.
Okay, sorry.
No, I don't need an answer, but I want to get the question out there. Is that there's talk about residents of NYCHA who aren't official residents of NYCHA, people living in the apartments.
Yeah.
And relocating those people as well. And so how do we address that topic? And again, I don't even answer.
There's actually a whole section in the tenant rights section that talks about that specifically and treating it and managing it. Like that was a huge issue, obviously, right? Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
In the back, yeah, Katie, and then.
I'm just trying to understand sort of what the plan is for the next month before March 8th. So if I understand it correctly, we should be voting as a full board the first Wednesday of March on whatever comments we're gonna make on the scope of work, which would then mean.
The environmental scope, not the building.
Right, the environmental scope of work, but it sounds like, to your point, Paul, or somebody made the point, like we should raise as much as we can. So then I guess my question is, I know that in our last HHHS meeting, nobody showed up. Or I mean, the parties didn't show up. Are they supposed to be coming this month? And are we gonna then?
They are confirmed, and we couldn't settle it because we have to move the meeting because it's the night of one of the public hearings. Jesse is working on this with me and Maria, figure out when in February that's gonna be happening. Because it's,
If I could just say, I think the recommendations, I mean, will be done in close consultation with HHHS and other committees. But it'll be a product of CLU, that is the letter that's gonna go out. If you want to stay close to this issue, obviously encourage you to be at HHHS. Join the CLU meeting, I think we said it's the 20th of February. There are gonna be 3 hearings, public hearings on this, and those dates we can share afterwards or are on our website. And HHS is moving its meeting to accommodate people's participation in one of the 3 hearings. So those are all opportunities. And then CLU will receive this letter with its recommendations, again, in consultation with other committees, HHS included.
Got it. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Josephine?
So how did we go from 2 fairly large NYCHA campuses to 3 buildings?
yeah,
No, are they empty or what?
no,
what's the-
they would be newly constructed buildings.
So.
But the amount of the units are going to be the same.
Yes.
Exact same.
Well, I know what you're
As
saying
of
about
right.
size, there's all this trickiness, but supposedly the amount of people that they can accommodate are going to be the same. I guess what's there.
No, the number of units would be the same,
Right.
but we don't know how many would accommodate, because we don't know the size of the units that are proposed to be built.
So there are 2,056 units now, there'll be 2,056 units later.
But we don't know if
Or just the nice ones.
Or just the night.
Oh, okay.
And then there's the additional new buildings, which
3,410.
3,000?
which,
410.
3,000.
and then some percentage of that, roughly 30% is affordable.
Oh, and we don't know what the affordability demands are.
A lot we don't, but
And that's what the
but
reason
there's
to get from
no,
that.
there's
But there is no parts left.
They,
no what? No.
No, there's still open space.
they do open, they do open space for the one.
There will be park space.
Yeah.
There is open space on the campus, open space can be there, but we don't have, except for a little
Yeah.
tiny
Exactly.
PowerPoint image, that it would be.
Postage stamp.
But I really do encourage people to at least, for some of these, and I don't mean to suggest your question was not, like, it's a good question, Josephine, but some of those real basic fundamentals of how many buildings, basketball court, parking spaces, community spaces, daycare center, grocery store, I believe are outlined here. They're definitely outlined in the scope of work. So if you could just take the time, all of us, to be familiar with what's there, so that at our committees and future discussions, we can like assume a shared understanding, I think would be very helpful.
That's my question, to the procedural question. So like, ACEs, we'll talk about like, the impact on how, excuse me, schools, we'll talk about parks. When do you want that into?
It's not ready yet.
So we're not
from
even, our committees aren't even looking at the
No, but
environmental.
So we have to ask the question.
We need to say, you need to study ABC. So
Right.
it's not that you want the comment, but you need to turn it into a question. Are you going to study this ABC?
Under-
Discussion.
Yeah.
And we do want those questions.
Yes, February.
Okay,
Yes.
so we'll talk, about it. You can help.
So
us.
this is, I need to just step in. I feel like Carrie and I had a different understanding based on our
Yeah.
decision as co-chairs of the Chelsea Land Use Committee. We assigned the members of our committee to take on this draft scope of work, which again, I say thin in the appropriate way this time. There's just preliminary is the outline, right, of what they're taking up. It does put out the big questions. We've designated members of our committee to come up with all the blank spaces based on their existing committee membership across other committees on the board. So for example, there are people on WPE who are taking up the WPE relevant topics as outlined in this draft scope of work. Time is not necessarily on our side at this point. I would say if you want to get us stuff, sure. I can't say that we'll be able to vote and codify it in our letter on February 20th. I would recommend that you reach out, take a look at the Chelsea Land Use membership. We sort of doled this out.
I think we can
Let's
share
share
who's been
that.
assigned with.
Yeah, let's.
Sure.
And then you can reach out to those folks.
I think the committees can pick it up and give suggestions. Yes,
You are going to get.
the committees can.
Yes, I just think we don't want to, we're obviously not shutting down any opinions or ideas. So, you know, I don't think that, it will be more formal at the next stage. But we need to make sure that all of our questions are in there right now, or else they will not be studied.
Right.
I guess I just do want to flag that I think I'm as frustrated as all of my colleagues around the table and then some. This is on the process, yes, and universally, Joe and I already find more conflicting
We
statements
just found something.
in a draft
that
of the work
an
this
alternative
evening.
one, blank.
And my only flag is I would hate to sow more frustration because all of our members don't recognize where we are in this process. And I do not say that to discourage or in any way stifle recommendations to come to Chelsea Land Use or housing, but just given the fact of where this conversation is this evening, and where our land use conversations are with this, maybe we should come up with a summary of what the draft scope of work is and what this process is before it goes out to respective committees, just on this.
Can I make a
We
recommendation?
don't
that-
want to read that.
Can I make a recommendation that Jeff, that we circulate the assignments from Clute? So like, Rodney is doing transportation, so you can work with Rodney. There's people, but you can go to your committee members and work with them on what their piece. There are 12
Yeah,
components of the
no, we'll
scope.
discuss it at committee.
And then you can
definitely,
discuss it at committee and make
Yeah,
sure that
exactly.
your land use person is sort of your lead on your
yeah.
committee.
It's liaison
Right, yeah.
for those, yeah,
And we can get all the comments in that way by the 20th.
absolutely.
All right, we still have comments from the public, so we'll move to that at this time, and we can start with Mike Noble.
Are we timing?
We're happy you're here to talk about this topic for everyone who's here. We're not gonna be strict on timing, but ask that you keep your remarks, consistent with what's been, with the topic that's been raised, right?
They went away?
Yeah, there's panel going.
Oh, no, they're coming in, they're coming.
Mike, you're up.
Good, thank you. Well, I'm happy that everybody's here. We're all focusing on this together. The document that we've seen here is extensive. And it's nice that Jeffrey has parsed the work out to folks to comment on them. If you want to go back and look at something that we did 10 years ago, you look at the Silverstein Towers scoping the document that we looked at, and there are guys and women on this committee here who actually commented back then, and it's a real good, give you a good idea of how thorough we were in our work. So I point that out to you. I can send you a link to it if you like.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah. So, but one other thing. So, in terms of what Jeffrey, what do you want us to give you? Do you want something written, or are you expecting us to just comment, verbally?
Well, you're on the Chelsea Land Use Committee, so certainly summarizing something, giving us into it written helps Carrie and I put the letter together, but obviously this will be a wider Chelsea Land Use discussion at which you can raise these things as well, Mike.
Okay, one other just quick point, you know, Carrie, when you mentioned that NYCHA picked the developers in this case, the team, well, no, they didn't. They didn't do that unilaterally. We had a tenant review committee, and it was us who actually picked those folks, and NYCHA approved our choice, right? So the tenants indeed picked that group of, you know, Essence and related to do the work here, all right?
Thanks, Mike, for clarifying.
All right, so, all right, good. So, but more than that, a lot of the concerns that I heard tonight, if you read that document that we're all looking at now, if you look at it in depth, and I've read every bloody word of it, okay? A lot of what was raised here tonight can be found there, right? Everything from tenant populations to how many people live in the senior building? Well, I was surprised to learn that almost all of those units are single person occupancy dwelling units, all right? And I didn't know that, and I live here, all right? That's
Thank you, Mike.
all right. All right, good, all right.
All right, thank you. We're gonna move to Dave Holoco. And just, you know, I'm trying to give short shrift, this is the time to ask these questions, but just remember your committee, you guys are on the committee, and that'll be a great place to further the discussion. Dave?
Okay, yeah, I'm glad to be hearing this discussion. I was at the CLU meeting and there were a lot of things on my mind. And unfortunately, the format really limited us to just asking questions of NYCHA. But I really think this kind of healthy discussion within CB4 is very much called for. There are a lot of points I'd like to bring up that don't necessarily translate into comments to NYCHA on their draft scope of work. Leslie earlier, raised questions about the legitimacy of changing an RFP this drastically. And I think there's a lot of concern among residents of the NYCHA housing that CB4 is playing along. And, I'm concerned that in simply staying within NYCHA's format and submitting comments according to the deadline, we seem to be condoning something that we're not entirely convinced is legitimate to begin with. So that's a concern of mine, and I'm worried that the no action option, which would keep the buildings, is really kind of a setup, that it's just there to be destroyed by evidence that we're presented that we can't really judge the merits of. And I'm alarmed to see things like lead paint and antiquated appliances and fittings listed. I mean, for one thing, lead paint was banned in New York City before Fulton Houses was built and before half of Elliott Chelsea. And lead paint, even when it's present, it's certainly not a reason to demolish a building. If it's flaking and near children, then it's a concern. Buildings this age have mainly had their appliances and fittings replaced anyway. I mean, it's not seeing anything about failing structure, which might be a cause for replacing the buildings. So I'm very concerned about that. And, just my view as an architect of Fulton Houses, there are things to be said for the original design. It has a perimeter of low-rise buildings that relate to the low-rise context around it. The tall buildings are kept in the center so that they're keeping shadows away from the street and they're not imposing on lower-rise buildings nearby. There's a lot of open space. We're talking about a tree canopy initiative now. I live on one of the Fulton House blocks. I can tell you that during Hurricane Sandy, the surface of the Hudson River came to 10th Avenue. My building's basement flooded. A lot of the basements in the Chelsea Historic District flooded. We're talking about getting rid of a lot of permeable space that has to do with resiliency.
David, thank you. These are very important points, and I'm glad you're raising them. I do think they're more appropriate at this point for committee. And I understood that the last meeting, excuse me, was not that opportunity, but I believe, and Jeffrey, Carrie, correct me if I'm wrong, the next meeting will be to really hash out all of these things and to capture them for the scope of work.
Irrespective.
Well, that was going to be one of my questions. Will we have an opportunity for more give and take like this that would inform our general position, which might underlie our specific comments?
So it's kind of like an LPC application, right? Like if we say nothing, they're going to do it anyway. So this is our chance to try to get as many of these questions answered as possible. We're not in a position to say, we don't think you should do this study. We can have separate conversations with our elected officials and with NYCHA and related and Essence and keep having those conversations. But this document's, if we do nothing and say we're against this, they're sending this out and we get back whatever is in there, and that's it. You know, we've been in this position many times on many different things. It's like BLP too. You know, if we say nothing, then they're going to get a liquor license with, you know, with an outdoor patio and you know, a big groovy band
Dancing in the streets.
dancing in the streets. So I think that's how you have to look at it.
Carrie, you said it all.
Yeah, and I just want to say one more thing real quick about this no action option. The no action option is what they're going to study of what exists right now, just to have something to compare to. So, for example, you mentioned shadows. So they're going to go and study how do the shadows move right now with what's right there now. That's no action, and then they'll be able to compare that to, you know, the first proposal, the second proposal, the third proposal, because there are 4. And I know it seems like there are 4 different ones, but no action is just study what exists. So it's a control.
It just feels incomprehensible to me that they would ever go with a no action solution after going through this whole process.
It's standard in environmental requirements.
Yeah, it's just saying this is what the shadow, how they behave with the current configuration and height, and this is how they would behave if we have 36-story buildings on 9th Avenue.
Like you said, it's a control.
Right.
Would you have a problem if I submitted proposed comments beyond the ones that I've been assigned that have to do with historic resources?
Absolutely not. Not opposed at all.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Dave.
I think we had Jackie, and then we'll do Salinas, and then we're gonna wrap this discussion up. Jackie?
Hi, guys, how are you? I'm out. You hear me now?
We do, thank you.
Okay. All right. I printed out your application so I could be a part of the community board 4, but I picked up this, I was reading it and this outstood me when it says, stay true to your principles and your ground beliefs, all while remaining open and empathetic. Do you guys stick to that? Huh? Hello? Do you stick to that, what it says on your application about staying true to your principles and your ground beliefs, and while remaining, open and empathetic? Do you guys feel that way towards what's happening at Fulton and Elliott?
Jackie, I appreciate the question, but I think we'll treat that as a rhetorical question for now. Thank you.
All right, I'll catch you on the next community board 4. You're gonna have to answer it on the next community board 4.
Thank you, Jackie.
Okay, the EIS. I don't think it's fair that they're doing it in the Fulton Community Center because people are gonna wind up being locked out. I think this should have been done in an auditorium in the school, the way de Blasio did when he was promoting the PAC RAD of the working group. So I don't know if you guys could influence of not putting the meetings in these huts, these community centers, because if there are massive people coming, then we will be locked out the way other meetings have been.
Yeah, we actually have, I have put that on our agenda to discuss with them their plan for ensuring full participation when we speak with them next week. So it's on our radar.
Oh, okay. All right. See, we're thinking alike. I belong in that board then. Bye, guys. Have a good one. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, Salinas?
Good evening. In response to Mike Noble, from my understanding, the person who chose Related and Essence as a developer was Jessica Katz. She was part of the working group and was chief housing officer at NYCHA. And she was able to afford resignation from NYCHA and take a whole summer off before starting as an adjunct associate professor at Columbia University. So that's just in response to Mike Nobles. I do have two more statements I would like to make. I wanted to clarify something that Miguel Acevedo said at the last CB4 Chelsea land use meeting. He said that whether our buildings get demolished or not, we are still Rat Pack, that this was decided at the 2019 working group. The problem with Miguel's reasoning is that the working group had decided no demolition of any of our Chelsea NYCHA buildings. What Miguel and many others fail to understand is that once the working group findings was violated, this makes the working group conclusion null and void. It's no longer valid. By violating the working group's decision, they crumbled up the working group contract into a ball and tossed it in the garbage. This means that if demolition does not happen, the developers cannot go back and say, oh, well, then let's just rehab. Sorry, but you can't have it both ways. Related in essence have been warned. They were told to withdraw and take demolition off the table. At the NYCHA fiscal year public hearing, both Lucy Newman and myself requested a withdrawal. Joyce, a Chelsea resident, also told them to withdraw at a CB4 meeting. They had ample time to do so, but didn't. By now, it's too late. I've had too many sleepless nights along with so many of us that are fighting against demolition. We've been under a lot of stress. We've been attacked during our fight and by the very people who should be the ones in support of us. Even if they do not agree, they should at least show support and allow us to protest, since we are within our right as public housing tenants. I've been harassed on the grounds of NYCHA campus while posting flyers. Our flyers have also been taken down by HOU workers. One of us was verbally assaulted twice, one which we have recorded on video. On Facebook, I've been harassed by cowards who post themselves as anonymous and also by using fake names. We've been called all sorts of names and they've made slanderous remarks about us. I've gotten into a confrontation with the Elliott Chelsea property manager for posting a flyer. And I heard this professional working lady when she told other maintenance workers that she just wants to punch me in the face. I also heard when she said that she's going to get my family evicted, but she's unable to because we are tenants in good standing. Since they can't hurt me one way, they'll try another. My father was verbally assaulted 2 days after I spoke at the January Chelsea Land Use Committee. We don't know who it was, and I don't want to make false accusations. It could have been a random attack, and I believe that it was a random attack, but I don't know for sure. I want to make the public aware of the harassment and constant stress that we've been undergoing. Point being, we've undergone too much hardship to just say now, well, we'll just go back to the working group if the buildings don't get demolished. We were willing to do rehab at first, but by now, we know that part of the working group conclusions was to have NYCHA begin an outreach and educate the tenants about RAD. This never happened. The working group findings have been violated in more than one way. It's null, void, and useless at this point. No demolition, no privatization. And I wanted to make one more statement. There's a reason why the survey results were released as an estimated percentage. They say that it was 60% of the 30% that voted demolition, when in actuality, it was 57% of the 30. The FEC tenants that want demolition is not 570, as many of us were allowed to believe. It's actually 550 tenants. We can assume that it's 275 tenants from Fulton and 275 tenants from Elliott Chelsea. This is why we must see a breakdown. I've heard from enough people, such as Barbara Brancascio from NYCHA and Darlene Waters, the Elliott TA president, say that most of the demolition option came from Elliott. How much more? 100 more? 200 more? This means that only 175 or 75 came from Fulton. Really? We are going to destroy a whole community on 175 count or 75 count. 550 people is really unacceptable. 175 is really just a crime. It's obvious, and we all know by now, that the only people who will truly profit from this are the developers. It's all about them and just them. And the very few residents, elected officials, and even nonprofit organizations that benefit with high rewards. FEC tenants against demolition have actually been doing door-to-door knocking. And we can assure you that the tenants don't want this. Many elderlies will suffer as a result of demolition. Some are bedridden, some have dementia. We have residents that are disabled, some with autism or other conditions. I myself have a nervous condition, and my anxieties have increased since this proposal was first introduced to us. This is a crime, and Related is nothing but an evil entity who's looking out for the best interest of itself. Thank you so much for allowing me to express myself.
Thank you, Salinas. Okay, we have a lot of work to do. And we'll look to, thank you, both committee co-chairs, all of you for presenting, and we will take this up further.
Can I ask one more question? Is that, what would it take to take another survey? Why can't we do another survey, our survey? Send out the thing, send out everywhere, and just, there's only one question, are you for demolition or staying? It's a simple survey.
But how do you ensure tenants?
What?
How do you monitor? See, the problem is that we don't know. We don't even know how the thing was monitored, right? And we know that it's not just how, these kind of things normally do a household. They did individuals in a household.
Right.
So it's not 2,056% of its individuals that were, not minors, right? We have no information. You have to really have like a company come in to do it. And this was done by Citizens Housing and Planning Council, that is a citywide not-for-profit that does policy work, not survey work. So I think.
But is your question, can community board for sponsor a survey of our own? We hire a consultant, come in, do a survey of the residents, and we publish our own results.
And we say, they don't want to give us their number. Nobody knows what the numbers are. And we say, this is ours. And now we say, we are the reality. Forget about what they said.
So we hire a consultant.
I think it'd be quite expensive.
Yeah.
Who's gonna volunteer?
Obviously, right. And
But I think what you're reacting to is that was a very sobering presentation. And that there's this incredible amount of anxiety and anger back and forth, because I don't think the survey is the issue in the end. I think we're just not, I have never been in a position like this not to have solid, good information. Now, we always get some bad stuff.
But that's the point, is that the survey.
I think the survey
is the problem, because they say, this is the information.
It's the way they communicate.
Right, and this is the information, etc. Everybody is upset about the survey. I think we should do another survey. One way or another, we need to explore how to do it and how much it costs, etc. But I think we should really do the survey, because then we move the reality of the facts from them to us.
Well, in the survey, Christine, for example, the first option was full demolition.
Right.
It was like 1A, like it was sort of
Right.
like.
Yeah, but I mean,
Forget
again,
what's on it though. I think
No,
we're
I'm saying
talking
that-
about the concept of
The
the.
point, the notice of intent is to release.
Yeah.
The scope of work is.
Right.
I'm not trying to say things can be turned around, but I just don't know if that's gonna be an effective.
I think our efforts need to be instead, we have been the primary public education spot for tenants and all kinds of people from the neighborhoods. We've talked about this. We have a part of our website that has every single document. Until we started doing that, this was an entirely under wraps thing.
But what could it hurt? What could that hurt?
Because I think.
Why would it,
I think it muddies the water.
but it doesn't for them. It doesn't muddy it for them.
So
What
it's
do you-
more of it's complicated, yeah, well, it's complicated.
We can be really
It's,
complicated.
yeah,
It's very complicated.
Unless that survey is bulletproof, which is gonna cost a lot of money, it's just gonna give ammunition to just reopen all these debates, however. it turns out.
There should.
Well,
They did do 30 listening sessions in advance of the survey being dropped.
I can honestly say, all of that is 100% window dressing. It was a decision made to do demolition.
My comment though is that the survey is not just printing up a survey and asking one question and putting it on people's doors, that there was a tremendous amount of outreach that goes along with actually having to deploy a new high quality survey that we can trust.
Right,
I
right.
think that this, that.
I think the focus should be on getting them to present the survey.
Which is,
I think
right,
that
yeah,
is public information, yeah, I think that, and I don't.
Totally
think-
agree.
I don't think NYCHA would,
How
I
do we
think
get that?
they wanna hire, they hired someone to do it, they should have that person come. and
How can we get all the elected and everybody
Well, that's
to
what we
be
talked
involved
about.
and say?
This is what we're saying, with a direct takeaway from our working
That's right.
group's charge today. Because between our standing meeting with NYCHA, and I'm saying our as the CLU and HHHS working group with the chair. Our takeaway today was to focus on putting the survey to bed, which means getting the answers from it, right? Getting that information. And so that was the direct takeaway from our meeting that we had today, sort of as an internal group. And I know that between conversations being had with our electeds, that's very much been.
And
NYCHA
NYCHA
has the time. NYCHA has the results.
NYCHA commissioned it.
Commissioned it, right?
They commissioned it, and I mean, I'm talking something as simple as 2,056 apartments. How many responded?
We could
How many-
submit
how many
a
people?
freedom of
And
information.
how much
Right.
from?
The
The actual-
filter and the other thing, I mean,
Right.
when I said what's
That
interesting.
is on our
We should do that.
approach
Yeah.
of how we.
Okay, so that's.
So we get rid of this once and for all. It
Yes.
feels the
Yeah.
step that you may not be.
Exactly.
Right.
Okay, and then I do wanna bring them, I know we could go, just because we could go on for a very long time.
Yeah, already.
I assume that this is known, but I think it's really.
No.
Nothing is known.
I was gonna say just that it's
No.
important about, how we are asking the questions, right? Like, we can't just be saying, we wanna know what the survey is. We're not asking who responded or what buildings they live in or whatever else, right? That we want to see the aggregate information, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's just important that we, are super clear on what we're asking for, and that frankly, we make it public what we have asked for. So.
Yeah, I think we all agree, I will share, I had a conversation with someone in Simone's office about this, and, you know, they're getting different answers than we're getting, on why they can't provide certain information. Being in dialogue with all of our electeds, as Christine, you just mentioned, I know we've talked about, is so important, so that we can all be not just clear, but consistent, and that we're using the areas of leverage that we have.
And what she said, the breakdown between the.
Among the two campuses.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
The two campuses was really interesting.
Important, right, so.
That's, we need to know
They
that.
have reported that they can't provide that
Why?
because they have, it's anonymized, but we know that that can't be true because they've said that they've disaggregated online and paper surveys. So that's
And you
where,
had to put what unit you're in.
Yeah, right.
so we obviously,
And then
like,
they have the information.
right, so these are, you know, as Jesse said, this process is moving forward.
Okay.
I think we focus on getting the answers we need to, but also make our focus, making sure that this scope reflects everything that we.
And raise those questions in the scope that there's a question of a survey and the information has not been disclosed. And we've asked for it, it's been said, we cannot disclose it. I never heard of that before.
That was pretty exciting. Okay, thank you all, and we're gonna keep at this, so, just, as we prepare to wrap up, just a quick chair report. We shared earlier, and apologies for not having done it sooner, but Jeffrey, congratulations on now being.
Really? Really, Madam Chair?
Congratulations, she had a whole point.
And I shared it before, but Josephine is now joined by Matt Green as co-chair of ACES, so congratulations to Matt. And then Inga has now joined CLU, so she has left ACES, moved to CLU, at the request for her area of interest. And Alan has moved from ACES to BLP. So just some reshuffling happening there. And obviously, you know, we are expecting applications were just released, and the town board president just released applications for community board. I think we have 3 or 4 open positions. Four open positions. I know in my conversations, for example, with Josephine and Aces, that they're really looking for someone who can better represent the art space. So while their committee should take that on, you all know people and we should be thinking about that. And if you feel like there are particular gaps in the experience and expertise at your committees, not just from a content and skills perspective, but also obviously representation and diversity and all of that, I really would encourage all of you to think about who you can reach out to so that we have high quality applicants for the board. In terms of active task forces and working groups, you just got a mouthful about NYCHA, so we don't need to say all that much more, but we're continuing to refine that process and engage our electeds as well. I am new to the Port Authority Working Group, but there was a meeting last week that felt very positive and continued development there, and they are similarly planning to release their draft EIS statement at the end of January, and that will go to Clinton Health Kitchen for review. Yeah, no, and transportation, of course.
Oh, this is February.
But
Oh, it's great February. I mean, I haven't seen it.
and we anticipate a public presentation from them, I believe, February 8th.
Six, just changed.
February 6th.
Are we talking, oh, yeah.
For Port Authority,
Got it.
February 6th. Additionally, I wanted to mention that we did pass a resolution at Borough Board related to casinos, which was consistent with the text amendment, with the way we voted on the text amendment, which was essentially disapproval, and the DCP worked to establish a zoning approval process that is subject to ULURP. So that was, you know, made consistent across. And we will be holding a hearing on casinos February 22nd. And really that is not to hear about specific proposals. So that is not the intent. It is really just to create a public forum. We know there are a lot of people for, against, and otherwise, or simply have questions and they want the opportunity to ask them. And so this will be the first opportunity, or, you know, an opportunity to do that in a public session.
But no specifics.
No specific presentation.
There's, no, the gaming commission,
Sorry,
the representative of the gaming commission will be.
Not
yeah,
applicants.
But
but
not,
not applicable.
not to speak on a specific application, but to speak on the process.
I think I've been there before.
CREC,
Was it?
Yes.
you did one. for-
Oh, is that what?
That's why you've been there before.
So you have.
I've been confused about it. Because I remember the guy from the gaming commission.
It's the same guy.
Yeah.
We're holding the Gary's meeting.
Okay.
So we are there on February 22nd.
Okay.
You do not have to.
Basically the background, how the choices are made, how
Exactly.
they vote, da, 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 da.
Exactly.
Okay.
Additionally, I wanted to mention, just as an FYI, but, you know that the Hudson River Park Trust came to the board meeting in January and then subsequently to WPE this, a few weeks ago. You know, this is a massive, this is regarding Pier 76, a massive, project with a lot of potential, but also a very big price tag. Regardless of what goes there, these piles have to be fixed. And then also there is the opportunity for, as we know, you know, maximizing this for public space and for all of the other things we want to see in the community. So we're hopeful, WP, I understand Leslie sent out an email today, really setting up the task force, or the committee, excuse me, to work on this. It also has land use implications, transportation issues. So I think Jesse was making a comment when I mentioned casino, or mentioned PABT, like this board's got a lot going on, and this is, Hudson River Park is yet another example of really a board-wide issue, with WPE playing a really driving force here, but we'll likely need to come to exec for us to make sure we have all perspectives reflected about what potential uses for the space could look like going forward, so that we can then begin the work of amending the act, which has to happen at the state legislature, and then of course finding the funds to begin the repairs that are needed.
You want me to take it up with housing, because it affects the affordable housing point too.
Right. A few very quick housekeeping updates. I just wanted to remind everyone, I think I've heard different things at meetings. Currently, as it relates to attendance, obviously we have a hybrid policy. You should fill out, if you cannot attend a meeting, fill out the form that Jesse has circulated. But as it relates to presenters and members of the public, currently the default is that we encourage virtual attendance. I know not every committee feels that way, and so we should just, one, I wanna like, not take too much time on this, but make a little bit of space for that. If we do wanna talk about that, I know, for example, HHHF, we really like people to be in person. Joe does, and so I think it's really important that we just acknowledge that there's an inconsistency or some various preferences based on committee. And most importantly, that the board staff who supports you knows what your preference is so that they can facilitate that. Does you have a question on this?
Oh, no, only to say that the benefits to everyone being virtual, right, is that it keeps it somewhat uniform in terms of who gets prioritized to speak. But when you have people showing up and virtually, inevitably the people who are here in person get a little bit more time. It's not necessarily fair. And so, and especially if there's like a topic and we're actually truly restricted by the amount of chairs in the space. I think for those reasons, we do need to continue to encourage people to be virtual.
So
Detail.
I just want to note that night and day at Clinton Health Station Land Use, for the first time, we saw city planning staff since maybe 2021 or 2020. And we were able to talk to them, engage with them, laugh, like there was a human relationship happening. And I think we got more done at that meeting than we did in the past 5 or 6 meetings with land use, because they're not in a little box. And then we're also in this box that is this huge thing that you can't see everybody.
So that's interesting. That was a presenter. That was a.
I'm looking at presenter.
Well, maybe, sorry, maybe that.
Well, sorry.
But maybe that is
Right
something that
now,
maybe.
It really made a
presenters
difference.
in public are encouraged to come virtually.
Well, maybe I could see having the presenters come personally. I don't.
BLP might be the difference on that.
Oh, God, no, not you.
But I think the presenters for us, for land use, it makes a lot of sense.
Like we were actually able to look at them, visual cues,
Sure.
they agree,
No,
they
I
do notes,
got
whatever.
it.
It's like,
The presenters.
And even in developers.
Again, just to be clear, I don't think Jessica's saying we need to
Yeah, we are
find
not looking.
a consistent thing. We just have to be clear and communicative with each other about if you guys want someone to be in person, to come in person, please let us know, so then we'll let them know. What I don't wanna happen is where I'm saying to someone coming virtually, and then they get reprimanded or felt like they should have been in person or something like that.
Okay.
If you feel like that, I think as we're expanding out of this room into different locations, we can also be much more flexible with the amount of people that we're having in rooms and stuff like that, so.
Cause what about
Okay.
what about letting us know from the co-chairs, who is excused and not? It's very difficult to figure out, are you here, not here, like that part, yeah.
I think the short answer to that one, honestly,
Like
is that the
traffic.
meeting is going, you have quorum. And so
In
you
person.
should, yeah, and you have quorum, the meeting has started, you're running the meeting, then you have quorum, and therefore you've got enough to hold a meeting and vote. And I think we can figure out if there is 1 or 2 people online that maybe shouldn't have been given the ability to vote because they're.
I don't want me to make a mistake, that's the.
Well, okay, but we can correct that later. is what
But
I'm
you also
talking
don't
about.
want.
Like, for example, I'll give the example, that you had an individual, right, you had an individual who claimed extraordinary circumstances at your last committee meeting, Joe, who I then had to go back and look up, and I actually was not an extraordinary circumstance. Their point of view was different than what we had voted on. I let them know, they know now, and we'll have to make sure we check, if it's a contentious vote, then that'll make a difference. But I'm saying.
We have a vote that's not.
Yeah, but I'm saying in general, I don't think you have that at a committee level, so I think we can cure all those problems after the fact. It doesn't need to be like, oh, no, you can't vote because, your reasoning was wrong, we can cure that, so I wouldn't worry about that as co-chairs, in my opinion, unless you want to, but I would just let yourselves go and do your business, and we'll make the fix later.
But just legally, I think that we should not, no chair should ever be asking like, so who here is, excused, or who here has, extraordinary circumstances? We should not be asking people to identify their health issues.
Health issues, that's not health issues.
Or whatever it could
We're
be,
not.
right? We just.
We're not.
But
If somebody is there.
I think it's an imperfect system. if someone is like, well, I will say this is happened. Inga, all right, reached out prior to a meeting and said, this is my situation. And I said, unfortunately, that does not meet one of the external circumstances. You are more than welcome to attend the meeting. And this is a previous committee meeting, but you would not be able to vote because you're just, you're absent. But because of virtual technology, she could attend. She attended, she commented, she didn't vote. The co-chairs of that committee were comfortable. That's okay. It's an imperfect system. I think we're not asking anybody's health situation.
Yeah, we never asked that.
And so, so like with the example with the HHS committee, I contacted the person afterwards, I explained the reasoning. So, if there was, we rarely will have to clear the minutes and make sure that the minutes accurately show that person, shouldn't be voting, but and that's that. We'll fix it.
So that would be a problem only if we have a tight vote.
Yeah, exactly. Like, right, there'd be a tight vote and we'll have.
And then we don't know.
Yeah.
The numbers.
Comment on housekeeping and it's, again, just for housekeeping purposes, but that, just like we heard tonight, increasingly people are coming to not just the board, but to committees to offer their public comment and want to be connected on topics that were both on the agenda and not. And I would just encourage, our board meetings are so full and with all of the things I just mentioned, those discussions are only going to go on longer, potentially be more contentious. We have the plan that we've always had of 2 minutes at the board meeting, followed 1 minute at the chair's discretion if it's very full. I know nobody wants to be stuck at a committee meeting for 3 + 4 or 5 hours, but committees are a really important vehicle for hearing directly from the community. And so I just want to encourage everyone, again, just housekeeping, not, there's nothing we're implementing or needing to course correct necessarily on, just want to emphasize that committees are a great place for that. And you should be thinking about how to manage your time and your agenda so that you can still have time to hear from the people who've taken time to participate and bring their voice. That is my chair report. I'll turn it to the district manager.
No, I got lots.
I knew that's what was coming.
No, so the draft full board agenda is in your Dropbox. There's copies of it out here as well. Please take a look at it to make sure if we missed something, I am sure we have, or we misspelled something. So we are 2 weeks away from full board, which is unnatural for being so close and having said. So, the February committee schedule is being created. There's a draft of that as well being sent around. It's in your Dropbox. Please take a look at it. To make sure that there's anything that's overlapping, that you have interest in, anything you guys want to coordinate on. That's all I really had to say. The only other, so good news is we were finally, the last step to be approved to pay rent here. So again, we were able to pay rent. We're back in good standings. We'll hopefully be here only from to the end of 2024, and then we'll be moving into a new place. Inshallah, which will be much bigger than this space, which will have a dedicated meeting room, and it'll be a good setup, and we'll be able to really put the AV into it. That's gonna be permanent AV, so there'll be screens and mics all around and all of that. So
Where is that?
What's that?
Where is that located?
It's in the old film center. Well, people call it the old film center. It is the film center building.
44 and 9?
44 and 9.
It's the North Country, so for the southern part, we will have to tread
the
towards
wall.
Yeah, we'll draw.
Difficult.
We'll give you guys some maps. Let's go.
And you're gonna add the maps to the.
That's true. Once we confirm all, yeah.
Okay.
If you are so inclined, we have the potential to see each other a lot over these next 4 weeks. There is between the hearings, the committee meetings,
For FDIS.
a lot. Sorry.
No, that was it.
Okay.
I have one new business. Sorry. Go ahead, Christine, you go first.
No, she asked for a motion.
Oh, sorry. Oh, I think-
To adjourn.
Though mine is, no one's gonna, well, I shouldn't say that. The Hope Survey is tomorrow night. It's the overnight count for homeless. Dolores, my partner, ditched me. No, she's sick. She's sick. So if anyone wants to do it with me, we love a partner this time, but if anyone's interested or pass it on, it's really great, actually. You start at like 11 PM or midnight, and it's only like a few hours. You get home by 4 AM. Sound like I'm 25. But like, if anyone's But if anyone's interested, that's Tuesday night and.
There is a new rezoning, you won't be able to do it.
Dolores has been doing it, yeah, I have to give her, she's been doing it for years and years, and she dragged me in, but she's been sick. So anyway, if anyone's interested.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, Christine, we'll take you.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. All in favor? Great.
Bravo, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Carrie.
Just.
Good night, everyone.
I actually.